stumbling down the road with Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff as she carries stones, digs holes, and wheels her shovels on her way. This road is the real path. It is never easy and never clear, but always entertaining. This journey has not been a seated event, as Bridgette walks, runs, stumbles, carries, digs, drags, laughs, fights, sings, prays, dances, kicks, screams, and oftentimes falls.
Hey everybody, this is your Saturday edition of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show. I still have the end of a cold, but I assure you that I have neti potted and done everything possible so that I will not have a coughing attack during the next 2 hours. If all of a sudden you hear dead air, I'm having a coughing attack, and I'll be right back. I'm your host, Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, and so where can you find Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show? Well, you can go to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You can go to our website. You can click on the schedule, click on Studio A. Both of my shows are in Studio A, and scroll down till you see the bee flying towards the flower. That's my show thumbnail. And you can go ahead and click on that thumbnail, that photo, and you can find information about my show and contact links and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so also while you're at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, you can also look at the Support Us link and find out the numerous ways that you can support Revolution Radio and keep us rolling along every month. We, the host and the management, we all volunteer our time 100% to bring you guys shows and information. And we are like one of the last, truth networks out there. A lot of them are being folded up and carried away and submerged and dug under, and so we would like to try to stay on, and we need your support to do that. So all kinds of different ways that you can support us on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and we have seed packages for those preppers out there, or committing to starting to grow your own food, or just stacking them away for someday. And also I do advertising. I have a healthcare by Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, and that I advertise on the network. So there's advertising. You can just toss us some money. That would be super great. All right. So, yeah. So my guest, I have no idea, no hide nor hair of where she may be. And I have tried to call her. So until she shows up, if she shows up, I'm going to be rolling solo today. So I kind of wanted to, kind of talk about, I'm kind of going back and forth in my healthcare practice. There are certain things that I talk a lot about. So for a lot of people out there, I also have a YouTube channel, which is Consciousness of Economics and Urban Farm Project YouTube channel. Has lots of stuff on there, has lots of stuff about my ET experiences, growing food, environment, my summer herbal course that I took, just a lot of different kinds of interesting stuff that is on there. And my website is coe-llc.com. And you can look up, my healthcare. I've got a page for my healthcare Been in private practice almost 30 years, been through just about everything. And, these days I'm while crafting my own medicine as well. So I'm like a full circle healthcare practitioner. Also, I work on people. I do different types of forms of acupuncture that I've developed over my time period, and I specialize in a type of acupuncture that I've developed called structural acupuncture. And the interesting thing about structural acupuncture is that I use it for land. I use it on animals. I use it on people. I can use it in just about anything that I need to use it on. And, maybe I'll talk a little bit about that. I also do farming. Biodynamic farming, did permaculture, spent 7 years building, as full circle as possible, backyard food production builds for people in the Reno area. And I've traveled quite a bit and worked summers on, people that are developing land, who get land, don't know what to do with it. There may be some stuff that needs to be cleaned up. So start working on some of those processes and teaching people how to do that. Also, I make, microbial mass to be sprayed all over the land so that the microbes can be restored to the soil to keep everything alive. And that's a huge thing right now, because the chemtrails and the nuclear radiation and all the spill-offs of all of it are seriously sterilizing the soil. And in some cases, when you start seeing these bigger trees fall over, that those heavy metals and all that radiation have gone, like way down into the soil, that, it actually killed the roots off, suffocated the roots. And there is also some scientists that are talking about how the chemtrails are actually, asphyxiating the trees, because the trees are like breathing in the carbon dioxide, and the heavy nanoparticles and everything else are actually clogging the pores of the trees. So there's, some discussion about that. And so you need to, there are quite a few, I'm just writing something down so I remember. There are quite a few people kind of around like the turn of the century who, were not only people who had doctorates. Rudolf Steiner was a brilliant nutritionalist, taught doctors about nutrition and plant medicine, at the turn of the century. And he, helped with creating biodynamics. And also there's a lot of other people who were pretty interesting that could see into the future. They say that Rudolf Steiner was like 500 years ahead of his time because of, the things that he saw in the future. And one of them was that, after the 21st century, 2100, that, will already be in a process where it's going to be very difficult to grow anything in most of the locations on Earth. And so he had these, we call them biodynamic preparations that he was shown, and that is part of the work, the legacy that he's left. So one of the things that I do, first thing I do when I land on anyone's property or land, is start to work on, I've kind of like moved out a little bit out of the biodynamic rigid box for composting. And I still adhere to the structures, but I'm also adding a lot of other things into the mix, into making the remedies so that it can be, pretty big microbial mass and mycelium and all of these things. Takes like, a good 3 months under good conditions to get, the digesting full speed. And once the digesting goes, then it, turns into this beautiful black, gold speckled I don't know, the kind of compost I make and I've learned to make is true alchemy. I didn't understand alchemy until I was on this farm, and there was a guy who was, bat poop crazy, lived kind of in the forest. He would come down to the farm. I did consider him kind of dangerous to a certain extent, kind of just more aggressive. But anyway, he had, this was when I had my first experience with biodynamic composting methods. And he had been working on this compost for the farm that I was on. And that's kind of the moment I really decided that biodynamics was going to be for me. And then I stopped doing permaculture and farm interns. And then I went to school full time at Rudolph Steiner College in Sacramento. Excuse me. So one of the things that happened, all right, on this farm that I was at, and this compost, and so he kind of wouldn't let anybody look at the compost. You don't really want to keep opening. Biodynamic composting is like way ahead of any other composting. There's no other composting method that even comes close. So there's always these arguments with people, because people think that they're, compost makers, and they're just not. Anytime you put compost into a container above the ground, there's no microbes that go in there. Like, you could put some worms in there. So then it's, it's worm farming. It's not compost, which is a whole, other idea. But if that container starts to get hot, it's going to be really hard on those worms. And there's also the potential of, your compost in those, compost bins to turn into sludge as well. I have no idea why they would even make containers to put compost in. And most of them are plastic. And so, there have been studies that show they were finding huge amounts, like in the South and the East Coast, of plastic debris that was landing into, little ponds and other areas. And then, the plastic starts to kind of break down in the water environment. And one of the things that scientists started to find out was that this is when it became a big deal about the BPAs, I think it's the BPA, that are in plastic. And basically what happens, so as soon as the plastic is made, because it's petrochemical, it starts to off-gas, poison, and it starts to break down. And I think it's the BPA in particular, what they found in frogs is that it could turn a whole pond of frogs into 100% female. So you would have, however many male frogs were born, but because of this, chemical in the plastic, immediately the frogs, even if, they were man frogs, would actually start turning into female frogs, and even in some cases laying eggs. So it eradicated, like the male chromosome, actually worse than eradicated the male chromosome. It actually completely changed the male chromosome while it was male. So, you think about all these, men out there or boys out there that are really heavy and have kind of, a friend of mine, he calls them moobs, which is man boobs, and wonder why we see a lot of this kind of stuff. And that's a lot of it has to do with the plastics. Everybody's drinking out of the plastics. A lot of food is in plastic. So there's this, this type of BPA. It's a high, one of the things that it does, it goes into, the living object, and it creates the living object forced huge amounts of estrogen hormone into the body. So it actually increases, the estrogen. So, it even can override the testosterone. So plastics are kind of, getting rid of, damaging, the male chromosome. So we don't want to put, it's kind of asinine to have a compost container that is in plastic or above the ground. So one of the things is, one of the things that one of my teachers, when I went to biodynamic college at Steiner College, I think the college is mostly closed now. I think that there are some types of events that are going on there that are Steiner related, but I think for the most part, it's been turned into like an autistic campus kind of a thing. So one of the things that he taught when we're doing the compost, the key, to making a specific biodynamic compost is that we want to work with the forces, right? We want to have a relationship with all of the forces in nature, and we want those forces into the compost. And so it's interesting that, in average mainstream, that we think that we can override or overrun things, right, and control and manipulate. Even with a lot of the, native way or spirituality, and this is why I really liked biodynamics, was to me it was very much that way, where it was our job to work with the forces, right, to better our relationship with the forces, and help to benefit these forces in nature, to to be able to be stronger and do a better job. So, when we would build these composts, my teacher Harold Hoven would say things that, we want to build such an amazing, compost, freestanding compost, and put so many, tasty morsels in there that it encourages, microbes and all kinds of, forces to come up through the earth, because they're down there, into the compost and decide to live there. And so the way I look at it, my first compost wherever I do a build is my inoculation pile, right? So it's the first one I built. Takes a little bit longer, I could probably, depending on the location and time of year, at least 3 months, and I can have that, freestanding biodynamic pile, chewed through pretty good, and have this, radiant, very humus, black, coffee-like soil that has all these specks, this alchemical process in it with really heavy mycelium. And I'm putting things into the pile that can be chewed down by the forces and the microbes or whatever else that are way down in the dirt, the ones that, maybe might be still around, that haven't been sterilized. So you have to really do kind of a really good conjuring job. So there's no way that a compost, above the ground is really going to be helpful. I guess it would be like, because you're not getting those forces into those containers, and then you usually put it into a container that's off-gassing kind of poisons that you're going to be putting that onto your garden, those poisons that the compost have absorbed from, the plastic, which is another whole thing, because now you're creating estrogen-rich soil that's going to create estrogen-rich plants, and then in some cases you're not going to be able to get them to grow fruit, some of them, and here you go again with this estrogen-rich cycle. All right. And that, it's not going to be good for, the other insects or frogs or to be in that environment as well. We want to help nature, not, F it up more. All right. So um, um, we want to like bring these things up. So a couple other thoughts about compost is that if it's an open air compost, number one, the sun is hitting it, the wind is tearing it apart. All these other forces that are not good for microbes, not good for microbial mass, heat. Sometimes those composts can actually catch on fire because they are open, they smell. There are a lot of things that, are not super positive about open compost. That another reason why I prefer the biodynamic ones. You could put, say, one of our favorite things to put in the biodynamic compost are dead animals. So if people have dead animals on their farm, or the animals have died, or they've gotten old and you need to take them down, put them down. We like to, put them into biodynamic compost and have the compost eat them down. And you can take, a dead carcass that's been dead 3 or 4 days that has flies and all kinds of stuff happening, and you put it into the compost, you shut the straw lid, and all the flies will completely go away. And it'll all be ingested pretty rapidly. Sometimes, I've called my compost Seymour, which, is from the, the big plant in the movie in the 80s where the plant used to eat people. But anyway, so, it's a big digesting stomach. And that's the way Steiner talked about the biodynamic compost, is that it is an organ, and then the straw we put around it, because it's freestanding, is the membrane, which, keeps it controlled and contained and happy, and keeps the elements from being able to get into it, and to steal away the nutrient that's developing. And so, when you have an open compost and you have wind and all these different kinds of things ravaging it, you have, water, you can even have like the compost not getting enough water, it getting too hot. It'll kill, everything in the compost if it gets too hot. The freestanding ones, they don't get hot. They may stay a little bit warm, but they don't get that hot. We want microbial rich compost. So I don't do any kind of heat in my compost at all. I let the microbes take it all down. I don't burn and scorch it, what's in there. The sun can eat away, it can, sun is radiation, so it can actually burn the compost and soil, which is probably not good for it as well. When we create the microbes in biodynamic compost, we really try to keep them out of direct sunlight. We keep the soil out of direct sunlight. And so what we might do is, if we're going to stir and spray the compost, or make a compost tea, or, there's all kinds of different things that I use the compost for. One technique I really like when I go to places where the soil looks pretty tough is I like to dig holes, like fairly deep holes, maybe like a 3 to 4 foot deep hole, and then I'll put a big metal or 5-gallon plastic container full of the compost out of the compost pile, and I'll put it into the hole, and then I'll put dirt over it and make sure it's not super close to the top where the sun might have access to it. And then as then it starts to spread out, and all that microbial mass starts to spread out into areas. So I can fix the inside and the outside simultaneously. Outside using the sprays from the compost. But we have to start kind of like thinking about, creation of microbial mass. And so that we can, start healing the soil, because if we're not really working with the soil in certain areas, then we're going to lose everything there. And there are people that have seen this, what the future looks like. And so one of the things that I like to do is educate people and teach people about making their own microbial mass on location, where they don't have to go buy anything from anyone. And then they can create it specific medicine for their land. Because, these compost piles are like a hard drive. When you get the first one, the first inoculation pile, and if you put enough stuff in it from all over the area, and so I'll collect all kinds of things sometimes. I'll go over a mile away and collect some pieces from, the wild junipers. If I see some fresh deer poop along the way, I'll pick that up. I like to pick up lots of different elements in a pretty broad scale of the area in which I'm making these composts, so that I can put all this information and data into them. So when it breaks down, those microbes break all that down. There's so much data and information. I mean, deer poop contains a lot of interesting information in it. It contains information about how the water is in the area of all the places that the deer has traveled. It has data on the plant life and what the deer, found to eat and all this kinds of stuff. So it has a lot of data and information in it. That's why, like sometimes when we're not letting our animals free range, number one, it's not healthy for them, but they're also not getting enough data and information in their body from the terrain, the environment, into their bodies and information. And that data and information comes out as poo-poo, and then it goes onto the land and it refortifies the land. But basically, if they're grazing, it takes a whole bunch of information from all over and puts it into one container, poo-poo, and then it lands on the ground. And so poo-poo is mulch. It has, nutrient in it. It also has a lot of information and data. And it's a transportation system of microbes. So those microbes get to go to, different kinds of locations than they were. So this kind of stuff is really, really important to make sure that, we get it right, that we are utilizing, everything we can utilize in order to make sure that, our land is good and solid. And we may have to, do this work ourselves. There isn't going to be anyone that's going to save us. I mean, there's like whole forests that are dead. Like all the trees are dead in it, and it isn't just because that maybe they had drought. It's because the soil is sterile. And you can see trees that normally, are standing straight now are kind of sideways. That's because the root system is no longer able to support the tree standing up. And that, the roots are contaminated with the heavy metals. And probably the weird, nanoparticles that we can't see either. So if we don't start working in our own little niche, our own little spot, our own little backyards, and start cleaning it up, stop using pesticides, stop using, chemicals and fertilizers are like by far, a horrid thing to even put on the ground. Like golf courses are some of the most contaminated, horrific, chemicals. And I think about people that, they're playing golf out there. These chemicals they put on golf courses, are off-gassing. So people are breathing them when they're on golf courses, right? They're breathing in all that chemical and all that fertilizer that's on the golf course. And then what happens is those kinds of things cause things like skin cancer, lung cancer, because once you start absorbing this stuff, then you're going to be more prone to things like skin cancer than if you weren't in environments that were as toxic and off-gassing. And then the stuff runs off in the rain right into the drains. And this is stuff that, is so poisonous that if we lived in a very moral society, would be banned. These things would 100% be banned. You could have like a super beautiful lawn with chickens. You just let them free range on your lawn. You just put up a nice little fence. You can get a great little electrical fences that have a solar box, and you can set them up anywhere. You can set them up in your yard and, keep the chickens contained in there, and they're going to dig around and get out the bad bugs in your lawn, and they're going to poop, and they're going to, that grass is going to really just dig it. And you can fertilize your yard, clean up all the bug problems with just a few chickens. And, guess what? They're going to lay eggs. So there are ways that you can get away from, using a lot of chemicals, and your chemicals are killing the environment. Chemicals are killing your pets. The chemicals are killing your children. And they're going into the water supply, because every time it rains, that stuff runs right off into the drains. Even if in your yard, you're out there spraying on your patio, some Roundup Ready. You just put some really heavy fertilizer on, and that stuff is going to run off. And you know what? It doesn't evaporate like they say. So anyway, it doesn't evaporate like people say. It's a petrochemical base. So if you went out into an area, say your boat was in the lake and it leaked a little bit of gas or fuel, you could see that kind of rainbow pattern of that little spill in the water. So people, because they don't see a little chemical rainbow shiny type layer coming off of it when it rains on your patio, or it doesn't come out looking that way, it looks like it dries and sticks, people think that that's good. It's not doing anything to the environment. But that petrochemical, another thing too about petrochemical, because everybody wears petrochemical. All your clothes are petrochemical. They have elastic. If they're not cotton or natural hemp, they're 100% petrochemical. Everything is off-gassing petrochemical chemicals, even your bed and your mattress. A long time ago, one of the first, I used to have a TV show in 2009 at SynCat, which was where people got together and had shows, and everybody volunteered their time. And, we would have seen some of these shows, they had we had old furniture and we put the show together. But one of the people that I had on the show was a woman named Karen, who had a mothership, pilot sleep shop in Reno. This was they started it, I think, in 2007, because they were in the mattress industry. And when they found out how toxic the mattresses that they were selling, not only just in the showrooms where they were breathing it in and other people were breathing it in, but in general, when these beds went out to people's houses, because the beds had, petrochemical foaming agents, plastic agents. Most of it was petrochemical made, the foam. And then also it had huge amounts of fire retardants, which, when your body heats up in that bed and your pores open and you start to sweat, well, because of your heat of the body laying on the bed, plus once it's made, plastic starts off-gassing immediately. And this stuff goes into your pores. You're breathing it. Your body is breathing it in through your skin, and you're breathing it in through your head and all your pores. And so they decided to move into trying to find as many different manufacturers all over the world who had organic mattresses that were made from natural products. And so she'd come on my show, and she talked a lot about how there was some speculation that SIDS, sudden infant death, was connected to the mattresses that the infants were sleeping on, because infants absorb into their skin 95% of their environment. I mean, and this is the other thing that really freaks me out, is people will put, Johnson's baby oil on their baby, and it's mineral oil. That is petrochemical. Vaseline, gasoline. That mineral oil is gasoline. It would be like the same as putting gasoline on your baby. The petrochemical products, petrochemical is in a lot of products. A product that a lot of people like, Tiger Balm, has a huge amount of petrochemical in it. It's like part of the base that makes it have a, sticky kind of balmy texture, right? So that it sticks on your skin. Whenever you are exposed to lots of things that have petrochemical, pesticides, fertilizers, all the plastic in your environment, your beds, everything in your entire world, and then you're putting on your body things that are petrochemical based. What petrochemical, the number one thing that petrochemical will do is it lowers your white blood cell count. So it can open you up to anything and everything, because once your white blood cell count drops radically, you don't have all of your, health warriors jamming around your body, because that's what white blood cells are. They're the health warriors. They go around and they clean up everything. They take care of everything, and they drive your health up. So what would happen if you had a low white blood cell count? Well, you'd feel terrible. You'd feel exhausted and terrible. If you went in to have a blood test at your doctor and they noticed that your white blood cell count was low, they would believe and actually start to create testing for either a major infection like staph, or looking for another, major type of infection in the body, including even parasitic infections, or cancer, because those are the major things that show up that they test for when there's a low white blood cell count. Now, what happens to your baby? Your baby's white blood cell count can get so low it dies. So what happens, when people are going through the really horrible, ungodly, barbaric, test subject, chemotherapy treatments? Well, one of the things it does is it destroys your white blood cells. It destroys everything in your body, and it drives your white blood cells to like zero existence. Well, if they don't, what they usually do is take you off chemo for a while, try to get you pumped up, give you some injections and some other stuff to get your white blood cells back up. Because if your blood cells are so low, you're not going to make it. You're not going to survive. There's just no way it's going to happen. So you have this baby, off-gassing in a petrochemical diaper, right? Plus, all these other things that are in the diaper. The diaper, in order to be white, they use things like benzenes to bleach it. Dioxins, things that cause major cancer. Period, end of story. Carcinogenic. So we have babies, they're hot. They've, have pee-pee, which is going to be hot. And it's breaking down these diapers. It's off-gassing, petrochemical and all the plastic, chemicals. And then they're laying on a bed and they're really hot and sweating. And now they're breaking down, the bed's breaking down, the plastics in the bed and all those fire retardants and everything else. And it's off-gassing. And then their body starts to absorb it when they cool down. So, I mean, what could go wrong? What could go wrong with that? Yeah, lots of things could go wrong with that. And I just don't think that people really understand what's going on with, how what we're using in our environment and how it relates to our health, because it's not natural. In nature, you can grow anything that you need. You can grow any possible thing that you need. Will it take some work? Hell yeah. But, most people are stuck in this cycle of working to make money to go buy the things that they think they need, toilet paper, whatever they need, when if you had land, you could just live on the land and grow everything you need. And would it take time to make the stuff? Yeah. Would it take time to grow the crops that you can use to make whatever you need to make? Yeah, it would take time. But you wouldn't have to have a job anymore. You wouldn't have to go out and be a litter bug too. I mean, you think about how much, trash goes into our environment every day. It's just unbelievable. Consumerism is killing the planet. It's destroying the planet. And it's taking us further and further away from sanity, and creating, environments that are super, toxic and sick. So I don't see that my guest, something must have happened. I know that she's been having a lot of stuff that's been going on. Okay, so I'm going to go back to compost and talk about the story before, I have the top of the hour promo break. So I was on this farm, and this is, thank God, this was the year before Fukushima. Because I wouldn't have gone and interned down there. And I learned a lot when I was down there in the Mendocino area, Fort Bragg. I was in the Fort Bragg area on a urban farm. We had 10 acres, and then we were utilizing down the road into Mendocino. We were utilizing a whole bunch of historic kind of bed and breakfasts where they asked us to come in and they would give us, land so that we could utilize it to grow things. And so we would try to help. We would try to help with growing herbs and stuff for, if they had a private chef that was on staff. So we would talk to them about, what they needed annually, what kind of herbs. And so sometimes, we'd ask them to put up a greenhouse, and so we would utilize all these, different areas. So we ended up having like 25 acres, I think, total. And then we'd go out and plant and harvest, and we had CSA, and we also shared, with the hotels and everything else. But anyway, so I was there, and there's this really crazy rugged forest. And so you kind of have to go down through this crazy, really rugged coastal forest to get down to some of those coastal areas. So this guy, he was living kind of up there in the ragged forest up there. So he would come back and forth and work on this compost that, really inspired me to go to Rudolph Steiner College and go through their whole program. And I took a whole bunch of different kinds of programs there. I'm actually just registered yesterday. I'm doing an 8-part program online with the agricultural lectures from Steiner. So I'm super excited about actually, diving deep into that work to help kind of deepen some of this work and understanding about how to make medicines and save our environment. But anyway, so he would come down, we put everything into these biodynamic compost, and we would just leave the stuff, in piles for him. And when he would get there, he would open it up and, put it all together. And on one occasion while I was there, he opened the lid of the compost, the straw lid, and the chickens freaked. They instantly, as soon as that lid came off, the vapors that, were coming off this compost, they responded immediately. I mean, immediately. And they were pretty far away, some of them. And they just ran towards this compost because they want to eat it and ingest it, because it's like, it's like magic. It's like magical medicine. Anyway, so he took some out and he put it in my hand and, was asking me about what I felt about it. And I could feel like incredible energy. Like on the bottom of my hand, I could feel the heat of the compost, but it wasn't like physical heat, not like fire heat. It was this energy heat. But then as it came below my hand, I could feel this cool energy that was coming off of it. If I put my hand over it, I could feel like the energy of this compost expand out into the environment. Like it was already starting to work out into the environment. It was already starting to try to connect. And then, when I dug through it, it was like black coffee, and the smell was so rich. And I could see like metal flakes in there. I could see like little gold flakes. I could see all this other stuff in it. And I was just really, really blown away about this compost. And if you had the compost in the bucket, the only time we would take compost out of the pile to utilize is either early in the morning or late at night to get it into the ground or onto the ground, so that we didn't lose any of the vapor. We didn't lose any of the stuff to the environment sucking it out once it's all opened. But it was the first time that I actually really understood alchemy, and that there was some kind of, base layer foundation in which not only could I study alchemy, but I could actually be an alchemist and create alchemy. I could actually take all kinds of things that seem to be worthless, dead carcass, some tree branches, lawn clippings, plants, all kinds of different things in a lasagna freestanding, compost pile, and turn it into gold, black gold, like soil gold that has every possible component in it to feed the soil, and not only feed the soil, but restore the soil, regenerate the soil, and, long term, we're talking 500 years in the future that these preparations were made for, to be able to heal environments enough so that, small outcrops of people in certain areas will be able to grow food. I just don't really think that people really understand kind of the travesty of what's happened to the planet, and what all of our responsibility is to get out there and fix it in our own little space, in our own little area, and try to, get it straightened out so that, we have not only a good chance of surviving, but thriving, and that everything that we're building in that environment is off-gassing in a positive way into other environments. And there was this really cool video that I watched by Paul Stamets, the mushroom guy. And one of the things that he was talking about was that they can see, I guess, in space, or I don't know, I'm not sure exactly how they see it, but they can see like these mushroom spores, because mushroom is a fungus, so it has a spore, it releases spores. This is how it spreads itself and grows, along with, mycelium, which is more under the ground, and it's a rooty type system, and it has a symbiotic relationship with its environment. But it will kill. If there is enough drought, or the soil doesn't have enough for the mycelium to eat, it will extract what it needs from the trees and its environment. It's like, kind of a cockroach. It'll stay alive no matter what, right? And so it can be really helpful, or it can be very detrimental depending on what's going on in that environment. But he was saying that they can see these fungus spores leaving, the atmosphere, And that, in a billion years, some of them might make it to, another planet that needs to be re-terraformed, and that these, spores will get there and, start doing a job. And I thought, wow, that's kind of like what I'm doing. That's kind of like what I'm educating. These are the classes that I'm teaching. And when I go out to places and I do consulting and education, I mean, this is kind of what it is. It's like, let's make your, property so nutrient dense, so positive carbon friendly, so microbial, rich, that it's actually off gassing into the environments around you, that it starts to help clean that up. But, it's an individual, it's an individual thing. It takes all of us doing it. Okay, so I've got about 3 minutes. Let's see, what else could I talk about? One of the things that I really like to do with the sprays, and so the way that I build these composts, or, the way that I'm doing my own work with these composting methods is I'm developing a compost that I can use as a compost tea. I can use it as a stir. I can use it as a spray. I can use the compost as tree paste to, as a component to put into clay and stuff that I can actually put onto trees so that they can kind of absorb some of that nutrient. Also, I can dig around the trees a deep hole and I can put that compost in there, put stuff over it to keep it protected. I can put it in big holes in areas that it's contaminated underground. I make a medicine that I can utilize across the board for whatever that I'm going to need it for. And over the last, 6 years, I'm dabbling with, like a whole other concept of, yes, people, I am a mad scientist. I'm a mad environmental soil. I'm a soil whack job. No, just kidding. One of the other things that I'm really working with is creating a edible compost, edible compost that, wouldn't have all the poo-poo or anything else like that in it, but it would have microbes. It would be microbial rich, and so that people could actually ingest it to cure every disease that they have. It might not cure chromosomal defects, genetic defects, but if it's a virus or, something that people have gotten, or cancer or whatever the problem is, people could make this compost, eat it, because the medicine is in your own environment. And so you would make it from your own environment. But also, once I have land, I'd like to make it and be able to, help people to get it so that they can eat it and start to heal their body. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about why I've kind of built those that idea, and about how I came about some of that information in order to do that. So anyway, no guests today. Sorry, people. You're listening to Carrying Stones and Digging Holes, the Saturday edition. And I am your host, Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, and I am blabbing today. I'm just kind of rolling on and with some information and ideas and thoughts. And so if you like them, great. Anyway, we're going to commercial. We'll be back at 1 after. Hey everybody, I guess it wasn't 1 after anymore. I'm not sure how my promos are working. So I don't know if they start at 4 till anymore or if they're after the hour. Anyway, have a little bit of confusion. Okay, anyway, I will take note of 11:06 being my time, being the end of the promos. Okay, so you're listening to the Saturday edition of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show, and I'm your host, Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, and my guest, I think, had some kind of emergency and wasn't able to make it, so hopefully we'll be able to get her back on in the future. So I am flying solo today, and just finding things to talk about. So last hour we kind of talked about plastics, environment, microbes, compost, a lot of those kinds of thoughts and ideas from my opinion, my opinions. So I just wanted to start out the next part with kind of how I got along into the whole soil restoration, compost, microbial mass as medicine kind of thought process for those out there that may be wondering. But first, want to talk about how you can support us because we are 100% listener supported. So you can go to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and you can click on the support links and find all kinds of amazing ways that you can actually help support us and keep our network on. And while you're there, you can go to Studio A, and you can click on the flower and the bee and find out information and links about my work and information and the show, and if you want to contact me or not. Okay. All right. So one of the books that I had read before I went back, because I've been in private practice, I do structural and energy medicine, I do nutritional, I do, extremely different types of nutritional work than the mainstream, even the alternative. And I also, am really big into these days making my own medicine, and what is medicine, and how do we, rebuild up the medicines in our system, because medicine isn't something that you should take one or two times and it eradicates everything, or that, you have to continue taking. Medicine should be something natural that actually regenerates and restores and builds up your system for a period of time, actually regenerates you in health, not slowly, kills you and you have to take more and more. That's not medicine. That's not what medicine is. Medicine that kills you or that you're addicted to, it really isn't medicine. They shouldn't even really be allowed to use that word. I'm not really sure what kind of word that they should use. Maybe they should put like skull and crossbones on all of the pharmaceutical medicines. But so what had happened, I think it was like 2000, I don't know if it was like 2008 or 2009. I came across this guy. His last name is Rubin. I forget what his first name was. He was like 25 years old. I think he was dying from Hodgkin's disease, and like 5 other diseases. He was like, 6 foot tall and a skeleton. He came from a prominent family of doctors on the East Coast, and they couldn't help him. They couldn't save him. And he was also in medical school, I believe, himself. And so the family basically put out kind of a memo into the public that said, if you can come up with something that will heal our son that's, alternative outside of our box, we'll change our minds. But, please, somebody come forward to help, save our son. So these people came through, and I believe it's a type of Jewish sect of people. I'm not sure exactly on the whole story on that end, but they cultivate soil. They cultivate dirt with, intensive microbial mass to be eaten so that your body restores all of its microbial mass. But because we're not touching the soil, we're not eating things from the soil isn't good. We're not getting microbes. So microbes are the basic foundation of all health in your body. Microbes were here longer than anything else is ever here. So everything here is built on the platform of microbes, right? They have microbes in them and out of them. So what I've studied and learned is that without the microbes, parasital type infections are completely different than microbial mass, right? So your blood and your body is identical to a compost that you can make, or how nature breaks things down, right? If it doesn't have the microbes, it can't constantly break things down and rebuild the soil, breaking things down into nutrient that when it rains can go into the soil that can be consumed at a root level. And in some cases also there's like a positive carbon field that actually, is generated from these areas, like in forests. And so it has like kind of an element of this positive carbon. That's another nutrition that people don't really understand. And that, you can't really regain full health if you aren't in positive carbon environments. But anyway, so we'll go to a story. I had a doctor who was one of the top, dark field hematologists in the United States. He'd been practicing medicine, for 50 years. He'd finally gotten out of all of his, medical licensing. And when you go in to have your blood read, they read at the microbial layer, which is deeper than the cell. So in the hospitals, when you go in for a blood test, they take a ton of blood and they're looking at the cells, right? Well, the cells are going to change their forms, if the microbes, they don't have a relationship with the microbes anymore. The body's becoming sterile for whatever reason, and the microbes are either dying, there's no new microbes coming in. They do have medicines like pleomorphics in Germany that are specifically that particular microbe. So say you have candida overgrowth, then you would take, the microbial pleomorphic that deals with the candida, because it's the positive microbe in the liquid in the jar that you would be taking so that it could remind the candida microbe, that's gone south, because everybody's born with candida, just a determining factor whether you get a lot of candida overgrowth or it doesn't. And a lot of it depends on what microbial function is the microbe in. So if candida is like a fungus and it's just kind of, hanging out, it's not growing, it's kind of staying in, one type of its persona or its identity, then, it may be okay. But when it moves on into, the stage where it now is taking a plant form, and it's actually growing a root mass, and that root mass is actually digging holes into your colon and driving itself up through your organs like an ivy vine to your brain to control the brain, you got like a serious problem. You got a big problem. And then, what these root masses turn into be is once the body tries to start quarantining them and calcifying around them, that's a cancer tumor. So you can get all kinds of different kinds of cancer tumors from different kinds of microbes that take on a different part of their form or a different part of their structure because the microbe went south. And now you need to put those microbes into your body so that you can actually get those microbes to let go of the negative or, all consuming forms, plant forms that are going to take over the system, back to something that's a little bit more benevolent. And you have to remember, we're like a compost, right? We're like soil. Our blood, I've had native teachers that have talked about how our blood is crystals. It's a crystal, and it's how we communicate on, like telepathic levels with information. And more, I really understand, the body kind of more like a compost or soil, and how it operates and it works. So when I went to the doctor, had my blood read, I remember this is before I was in biodynamics or studied this thing about this guy, Rubin. And one of the things that was interesting is, in dark field hematology, they only take 1 drop of blood. They don't take, 800 tubes of blood. And they diagnose you from the microbial layer. And so we're looking at my blood up on the screen. And that's the other cool thing about going to a doctor that does dark field hematology. So it takes 1 drop of blood, you sit there with the person, you look at a big screen, and you're looking at your blood. You're looking at the microbial level of your blood. And it's interesting because he was so good at reading blood that he could find things, that needed to be taken care of, that, long term would have wrecked the system, taken my whole system down. And I had brain cancer. So it was very important for me to go and check just to make sure the brain cancer wasn't coming back up in my blood. So it was really important for me to know that I had completely cleared it and completely had wiped it out of, all systems, balanced it out, right? Got it under better conditions. So one of the things we're looking at is we were looking at these little teeny microscopic worms in my blood, and, they're eating little bad things in my blood and all this other stuff. And I remember looking at my doctor and saying, "Oh no, should I do a parasite cleanse?" And he said, "No, these are different. These are your baseline microbes. And like a compost, they're eating up all the bad and they're regenerating it into useful, products. It can go back into the system and actually be applied as nutrition and, other types of things." But I was just blown away. He said, no, your blood and body is like a compost. And there has to be this perfect balance of the microbial organisms that you have, that are constantly working like a compost and cleaning out all the things that are bad, that don't work, that are dead, that are toxic. And so if you don't have enough microbes in your system, your body can't do it at the pace that it needs to. And because our systems are, our environments and everything else are more and more toxic, and we have less and less microbes in our body because everything we eat is cooked or it's pasteurized, it's sterilized, and all of the, pharmaceutical medicines we take are sterilized. So we have a totally sterilized body. I was reading an article from a woman who was doing some scientific stuff, and she said that 1 tablespoon of pasteurized, homogenized milk could sterilize 1/4 of your colon. And you think people drink a whole glass of something that's, pasteurized or homogenized, right? So it has this, opposite effect. A lot of in our food has opposite effect. A lot of people don't understand that if you're eating things that are grown and depleted, so, most of the bread, white sugar, and so white sugar is refined down, and the molasses part is taken out, and the molasses part is what has all the nutrient. And the white sugar has nothing in it. It's so void of anything that when you consume it in your body in any kind of product or on its own, that it actually has to pull whatever nutrient that you have in your system, including your bones and everything else, into it so that your body can digest it and metabolize it. And, to eventually get rid of it. Same thing with bread, whole grain, a real grain that's broken, has tons of nutrient in it. But they give the poor, broken down, void, part of the grain product to most bread manufacturers. So when you're eating that bread, it actually is going in order for it to get through the systems of the body has to pull nutrient out of your body. So if you already have like a depleted body, you got some problems. You're smoking, you are drinking, you're eating a lot of, dead nutritional products in your diet, and, you're not also going to have really much microbial mass in your system, because all those products are also, leaching everything out of your systems in your body. And there were a lot of studies that I was reading about 10 years ago on grain, just, for thought. And that, during the Edwardian period, they think that there were a lot of wealthy people, and even like kings and queens of countries, and that went insane because a lot of the people that were in the lower part, the peasants who grew the grains and broke them to make bread, would keep the heavy, shaft parts of the nutrients of the grain to make their bread, because also the elites or the heads, the heads of the households or whatever else preferred more of the refined stuff. So a lot of them would go mentally insane because they were B vitamin depleted, right? They had no B vitamins. So, we're eating a lot of bread, and we have a lot of products that have zero nutrient and so void that they can't be processed by the body unless the body pulls nutrient out of itself in order to get it broken down and metabolized. So back to Reuben, this guy Reuben. So he ended up writing a book about what happened. So this Jewish sect brought this soil that they were making that was microbial rich, that they said cured everything and anything, because it put all those microbes back into the system. So the family was so desperate, they were willing to try anything. So they put Reuben, I forget what his first name is. Anyway, they put him on a, they put him, at a beach house. And what they did was they had this Jewish sect, make this dirt, and he ate basically a handful of dirt, of this, microbial rich dirt that's created and made by these people. And he ate a handful of this dirt 3 times a day for 6 months and purified water, and that's all he had. At the end of 6 months, he was cured of everything. Everything that he was dying from, he was cured from. So he went on to write this book. I think it was called like The Maker's Diet. And then he went on to build this company called Beyond Organics, that specialized, had a membership only, so that you could get products that were made from all over the world that were microbial rich, so that you could get them to your doorstep. And a lot of them were raw type milk products that were, heavily fermented, and a lot of different kinds of things. I don't know what's happened with it now, but who knows? But anyway, so that's, also a lot of these things, have been chains of events in my life, like how do we ultimately have health? And how we ultimately have health is the same way that how ultimately the environment is healthy. It's the same exact thing. And we're just at a place where we're going to have to really start, making and developing a lot of these kinds of things so that we're more connected with nature. We're ingesting medicines, created by nature. And then we're making these same types of medicines for nature. So that the microbes can go in and, return, the microbes that have gone rogue back into a benevolent microbe that's beneficial, and where they're doing their jobs, where they're breaking things down and building them up, and breaking things down and building them up. Now, the heart of inflammatory disease, except for especially blood inflammatory disease, is that the microbe leaves the cell, and the cell, the red cell, starts to get sticky and coagulate, and then it starts to block the artery blood flow, arteries, which is, the positive blood. So we get back to also talking, there's some other stuff about inflammatory stuff that I usually recommend. I don't know if I'll get to that, but you can always, create an appointment. You can have an appointment with me, and we can talk about a lot of these stuff and your health conditions, and try to help you, come up with long-term plans that will promote, long-term health in yourself and others in your family, in your land too. So when the red blood cell starts to collapse, that is the blood cell that actually moves oxygen. It moves metabolic products, which are, nutrition. It moves water, takes all these different things all over the place. And so it provides all the organs and everything else with everything that it needs. Well, when they start to collapse, they no longer hold those things. There's no longer receptors for holding anything. They're in demise. They're dying. They're breaking apart because the microbe is no longer, inside doing its benevolent work. It's now outside of the cell, and it's, becoming destructive, and it's going into like a different phase. So a lot of times that the microbe can also, when it's outside of the cell, it does have a byproduct that is not healthy for the body, and it's a type of lactic acid. People always say, oh, my muscles are sore because of lactic acid. Well, the more acid, in a bad way, there are acids that are good, that are, if they're contained properly and used properly. But once they start to activate the system in a bad way, then they become detrimental, and then your acid levels go up, and then your body has to start extracting calcium out of your bones in order to cool the blood acids. So inflammatory disease. Now, if you get a blood inflammatory disease where your blood's thickening, you're exhausted because, it's not transporting oxygen, it's not transporting, metabolic, it's not transporting oxygen, water, or food around your body, you can also have what's called a red blood cell stroke. And in some cases, they can be fatal. It just depends on how thick your blood is in your blood. But if you have that inflammatory, then you have already had some other systems in your body that have become inflammatory. So you've got like, it's a cascading effect. Once one system, starts to break down in an inflamed way, then eventually the blood, it'll take on the blood, and then you'll have full-scale inflammatory disease, and it's very difficult to actually come back from. And people spend years exhausted and can't sleep and can't be awake and just dragging through life no matter what. Even sometimes diet doesn't ultimately help. So there are things that can be used for that. So going back to, creating soil where you could, the number one nutrient I like to put in a nutrient category is microbial mass, getting microbial mass back into the body so that the microbes can change their counterpart microbes that have gone south back into more benevolent, and the system can start being cleaned up. And once the microbes are happy in there, then the cells become happier, and everything goes back into a positive relationship inside the body. So that's a super important part. So one of the things that I'm constantly working on is creating soil type medicines that can fix and cure anything: environment, animals, people, water, air, and how and generate them, creating them and growing them, and teaching other people how to do this kind of stuff, and so that it's each of us saving ourselves and then saving everything else around us. So I've done a lot of spiritual work in my life. I've spent a lot of times back in the 90s working in groups where we would gather together and we would work on energy grids, around the planet, in space. And we would also work on, I was involved with this one group where we actively worked on companies energetically to get their companies to, create same products but beneficial, and that way the companies wouldn't have to close and all the people wouldn't have to leave their jobs, but it would just go from the company just kind of waking up and then creating products that they're making that are bad and killing everything to making products that are good and beneficial, and then people not losing their jobs over it. So we're trying to do changeovers in the energetic field and trying to create, like hard drives and databases that could support this kind of a transition. So, and I worked on that kind of stuff in the 80s. So 80s and 90s, I worked a lot, spiritually and energetic, and as I'm aging, I'm coming back. And one of the type of work that I say that I do is I'm bringing everything back to earth. I'm bringing everyone back to earth, because that's where our focus has to be. And we have to actually start the restoration process and regeneration of our environment and our bodies and for the insects and everything. And the only way that we can do that is if we start to become super responsible about our environments, and what we put into those environments and how we build those environments, and what kind of tools and skills are we using in those environments, and how does that roll off in an actual, off-gassing, positive off-gassing way, where you have microbes that are traveling in the air and through the soil and in the water out into areas that desperately need these microbes to be replaced into, put back into. So, yeah, it's a one at a time job. I know that some of my work kind of sounds like it's really far out there. But, I've been in healthcare now almost 30 years. So it's just part of, it's part of my madness. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So I wanted to kind of briefly talk about some thoughts around structural acupuncture. So I've been doing acupuncture for quite a while. The long periods of time I took off, really didn't do a lot of it. And then what started happening was that I started noticing that I could work on someone, and I could use acupuncture to activate other areas that I wasn't working on. So it gave me the ability to, do my hands-on work on somebody and be able to tag team them, because the sessions were like an hour. So I wanted to be able to do the maximum work possible on multiple levels. And so I started to develop what I call a structural acupuncture. And then what happened was then I ended up going to Rudolf Steiner. And I really started to look at the world a lot differently, like trees as big acupuncture needles. And just plants that could be used, as acupuncture needles to hold spots. And I come from old line of, folk medicine, heavy spiritual medicine, where, I had people in my family that could energetically, manipulate environments. But they would use things. And there's some folk stuff with, if you have an area of your land and it's not going really well, you can't get anything to grow there, you might want to pound in an iron stake, right? And what it does is it changes. I started to realize, like, well, this is acupuncture 101, but it's like on the soil, right? It's on the land. And and how you're changing that energetic structure by putting something long term in there. I started to think about, like, how I could use plants. And you not only use plants in the environment, but say, for example, not only is the energy wacko, but also they've got like a serious ant problem, right, in their yard. Because I was doing this mostly on, in the beginning, places that I had to work were, like quarter-acre properties, people in, downtown area with yards and things like that, and, building. I was really working on, while I'm building these urban farm, full scale, teaching them how to do the compost, how to get away from all the chemicals, how to have a few chickens and how to utilize those chickens around their yard, and then build food production and teach them how to plant it and make transplants. And so for at least, a year, 4 seasons, I would help them to keep their whole thing alive while I was building it and putting it together, and then teaching them how to utilize it fully. But when I would have problems, hold on a sec. But when I would have problems trying to, figure out how to get rid of like certain types of insects and stuff like that, I would start to actually use some of these concepts, so that I would actually plant, like say a plant that, ants don't like, as an acupuncture needle to actually fix the energy in that space, but also to detour, the ants as well. So I started to really kind of use some of these acupuncture models that I was doing on people and animals into the environment, and to change, energy flows, and actually for long-term purposes. And what I started to notice is that there were energy lines that started to change in these neighborhoods, and the energy lines were starting to change in the city. And then I started to see how we could even change the universe, by these certain kind of, because, in a lot of the work that I practice, I can't trespass, I can't do any harm, I have to ask for permission. So how do I change, large scale environments when I only maybe have permission from somebody's little yard in a community in downtown Reno that I'm actually doing restoration work? So how do I change those acupressure points there to actually go out and change those ley lines all over the place? So I started kind of doing that. Anyway, so it looks like my guest showed up, so we have 20 minutes left.
I'm so embarrassed. My whole universe fell apart. I have 2 phones and one at home and my internet. And believe it or not, Windows decided today was the day they were going to upload everything. So I don't know how to get on Skype on my phone, even though I've got a little thing. But it was stuck. Every time I'd open it up, it'd be on a thing. And it'd say, you have to pin and press and hold this to get this off, just to get on. I was like, what the heck? It's like the universe says, you can't go play today. I'm like, ah! So my family fell apart at home. Bridgette, you wouldn't believe it. Oh, you would not believe it. Dealing with people on the planet is so absolutely amazing. I'm so apologetic to you because it's crazy. I've been looking forward to this. I posted on Facebook that I'd be on Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff's show today. So I apologize to you and your listening audience. So
that's okay. I just tortured them for an hour and a half with just me talking. So
I was tortured. I've been tortured today. Folks, do you ever have a day where you just think everything's so perfect and then all hell breaks loose and it's like it's totally out of your control? All the electronics were deciding to upgrade or keep me away from them. And my family decided to have a family emergency squabble over, well, I've got a daughter that drinks really bad, so I had to clean her up last night and get all the dirt and the leaves off of her. It was soaking wet. I guess it started to rain last night. Well, she's 51. I'm 68. So, they say a son is a son until he takes a wife, and a daughter is a daughter all her life. But she just lost her husband, and so they just buried him, and she's a mess. So I'm hoping she'll get through that. But, we can have all the good intentions in the world, but we're really not in control. So that's just what I'm going to say, because I can plan and, this is one good thing about you, Bridgette. You came into my life, and it's totally unexpected. Remember, you just popped up on my show one day with, or was it? No, it wasn't even. We weren't on radio, but it was with Mad. But we should tell that story because we weren't going to even. I mean, the universe put us together when we weren't expecting it, right? You didn't know you were going to talk to me. I didn't know I was going to talk to you. And today, when I thought I was going to talk to you, an hour and a half of my life was all controlled by something outside forces. So explain this. Why is it sometimes we can meet, at least in the unexpected, and then the times when we're supposed to, it won't work out? It's not like I'm dating you. You know what I'm saying? It's the universe. It's like other things outside. So I don't know.
I leave it up to the negative forces. I think that they're they're acting badly.
Well, something, because we're supposed to be shaman women. We're shaman people. We go with the flow. We balance the universe. Everything we do is based on, what we've learned and thought and taught and wanted to be better at. So we think we're doing our best, and sometimes our best isn't good enough, but we just have to, forgive, forget, and go on, or say, I'll forgive, but I won't forget. It seems to be what everybody's doing, but I guess that's how we learn. History says, those that win the wars get to write the history. So anything that we can go back and read is something somebody won over and got to put down, and we think that's who we are. So, I keep wanting to believe the best. But tell me about what's going on today. You were talking about ley lines, which is one of my favorite topics, and I just happened to see a YouTube last night on the ley lines. So, and I've heard some of my best friends in the business of, I guess you would say, metaphysics that don't necessarily agree with the various topics or discussions going on about the magnetic forces and the ley lines. So was that what you were talking about, helping the universe and Mother Nature? Because everything's alive. You and I both agree with that, right? In 2019, you and I have the psychic women what did I call us? A super cell or super clan?
Champions.
Champions. We are the champions, my friend. So all those people that want to be like you and me someday.
Well, we hope that they want to be like you and me someday.
They probably said I'd never be like y'all cray.
Yeah. No, there was that one movie, I forget what the movie was, and there was the girl, and there was all this hell broken loose on the movie, and she turns around and she looks at this other lady and she says, You're 2 scoops crazy and cuckoo you do.
Well, let's just say that we love ourselves and we have fun, because at the end of the day, it's us going under the ground or being turned into ashes, and we're going to go, well, that was fun. Or are we going to go, oh, shit, I got to turn around and do it again? Totally believe in reincarnation, folks, because if plants come from plants and trees come from trees, where do we come from?
Yeah. Well, the thing is about ley lines that people forget. See, language is a problem because meridians, ley lines, those are the same concept. So if you have meridians and you go get acupuncture to alleviate electrical energy problems that acupuncture can alleviate, and in some cases make you well because it returns, energy to your pathways, then why don't plants have meridians, and why doesn't the earth have meridians, which are ley lines? So we could say, you have ley lines that map through your structure, that they utilize acupuncture needles to actually balance out and reconnect. So I kind of look at all the same. Yeah.
You and me to have something, and I'm not sure what it is, but I don't know if it's, what it is, but I like it. I wish my daughters were more like you. I had 4 daughters, and none of them are like you. One was sort of close to being a shaman, or one that heals. She is the one that everybody says was crazy, but she's the one that just passed with cancer from being a beautiful painter, left-handed beautiful painter. But maybe I'm adopting you. I don't know. But you just came into my life right when she died March 16th. But we met last month. Did we meet in September? Was it September you and I met?
Yeah, I think so. On your show.
In this reality. So ley lines and clans. Does that go together? You think souls that we go in groups? Is this too deep? I don't know your listening group on digging holes in carrying rocks. And I really did want to ask you today where that came from. But soul clans, maybe you and I are together in another place in space and we just come down here in these biological containers to talk to each other and play. I don't know. I don't know what all this is about. I think I do because, soul purpose and stuff. I know I'm supposed to communicate, but, you think we have soul clans off planet?
Well, all I can say to that is I had a teacher at one point in time, and I'm thinking we'll just rebook you for my show like the 26th. We'll see if that works out.
Oh, that's the day I was born on, 26.
Oh, good. Well, maybe it'll be a good time for you to get on the show and we could talk about crazy stuff for 2 hours. So all I can say is that my native teacher, Lakota Sioux medicine woman, and I'm not going to say her name because I don't have permission to use her name. But one of the things that she said was that how it is supposed to work. I have whole other views about how things are working down here now, which are not beneficial and not super positive. But she said that we are, you know how a dandelion goes to seed and then you can blow on it, you can make a wish, and then all the seed pods go out.
Yeah.
She said it's like that, like God is the dandelion and that we're all connected to it, and then we're blown off. And we all get blown off into different greenhouses, kind of where we develop. And she said, so people that have a soul, she called them soul imprints. And she actually drew mine for me. But
wow.
She said that the soul imprint gives an indication. It's kind of like a watermark, like if you're going to do a video and you want a watermark, so it kind of gives you a trademark. It's kind of the same thing from where you come from. And she said, she said people like her and I, she had never taken apprentice. Mind you, she's native. And back then there was still a lot of, upset going on with native people. And a lot of them hadn't stepped out and started to train everybody, you know what I mean? And teach everybody, where that's changing now, which I'm so greatly appreciative. But she said that the only reason that I became her apprentice for a year was because we came from the same place. We had the same,
there you go. That relates to what I'm asking, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Is that real? Yeah.
Yeah. And she said, all the people who are master teachers on the planet, including Buddha, Jesus, a lot of these other people, and her and I come from a certain part of, we could call it the galaxy or that universe, but it has a specific name. So she said what we're incubated in those places, and that, we travel, some of us have traveled a lot to different universes, and we've worked as different things, being sometimes just energy blobs with no physical structures. And we specifically do that which we do, and we do it well.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah. See, you put words to things I think and know, but I don't know how to express them, because that's one of my missions. I think I don't know it, but I'm thinking with my brain, because I don't know how to express most of the time my compassion or love or my feeling of me. I know I exist inside, and I've died 3 times minimum in this reality. But you, since I met you, you're making me do better. I mean, I put that psychic university together, and then you recognized it and went, oh, I saw our names, blah, 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 on the internet. And I thought about it. I was like, oh, I wonder who. I was like, wait, that's us. That's you and me. I was laughing my, ass off, so to speak, because I was like, wait, that's you and me. That's what we did. That's what you and I created since we got together, the Psychic University. Who knows what communication is going to be or what words are going to take form. I just, it's not us. It's the universe. It's the creation. It's the source. So whatever you and I do together, our little blows off of the dandelion is making more stuff to play in. More, for me, it's like a sandbox, a communication place. See, Barbara Lindsay had psychic something or cosmic, school or something.
Oracle. I think she has the Cosmic Oracle radio show, right? And
Janet has the Tantra, Universal Tantra School with her husband in Hawaii. And you and I didn't really have a school, but I was talking about you helping me, do some workshops and sessions with me and Ahmad, right? And so it just all came together. And I haven't heard from Ahmad. Have you heard from him lately? which he and I stay in contact like pretty much. At least I can see I feel okay in the universe.
Well, don't
because
you
his
have a
mic's
show on? I thought you guys have a radio show on Friday night.
We do, but he wasn't around and I didn't know what to do. So I don't know. Since Mike died and they changed the Revolution thing, and I wasn't part of the developing team because they used their 8 managers. So Monster created it, right? And we still have freedom slips with GoDaddy where I work. And I've been with GoDaddy since 2006. So actually, 1998. But the guy started, now he became a multimillionaire and they went public. But anyway, I'm still there, but I don't know. I love Ahmad, and he's been going into audio books on his show. But yeah, we have 2 shows we do on my channel for archivists. We work with the UFO Association and the Ascension Center organization. He helped found that with me in radio shows. But is his yellow today? Can you see his? Let me see.
Yeah,
it's still yellow.
I think what happened was that he. I don't want to talk about him super public, but I think he's kind of more back to work. So.
Oh yeah, he did say he was going to have to go back and make some real money in 3D, which, he's such an artist, but because times are tough, folks, if you can look up a Mad Painter on what is it, Drizzle, Razzle, Zazzle. If you can buy some of his stuff. And then he's got some new books out. He's got audio books that are really inexpensive, $1.99, $2.99. And then he started Allied Command Organization, Department of American Communication Line with me. So what it is we have different projects to get out the information. He's really big on exposure to disclosure. So, but anyway, you can help him. That's great. We all need a little funds. And you've already done your pitch for Revolution Radio, right? For helping us because we're all helping each other.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
Well, you and me can do this with Psychic University and keep building the Shaman People. I've got the Shaman People magazine, but it's just starting all since I met you. So, see, you are let me see, what is the word in my many, many years of discovery since 84? You are a catalyst. Some people are anchors, but you are like a rolling stone gathers no moss, but you are a catalyst. That's what you do to me. And I haven't been around one in ancient, like eons. So maybe we are ancient souls in your teachers, your native teachers group, or we are the dandelion spores, or what are those little feathery things that come off of the dandelion? Maybe we're like
seeds.
One of those
They're
seeds.
like little seeds. Yeah, they're like, they're little, basically design of a parachute with a seed, and then the wind blows it, and then it lands and plants itself. Yeah.
That's a good analogy for you and me.
Yeah, plants are pretty amazing.
Seeds. I've been called a star seed. I got written up a really bad, negative, derogatory thing. If anybody wants to look up the bad stuff on me, that's the only thing I can find on me. You know how you go search your name? And the guy didn't even get my site or try to contact me like a good journalist, which I like to be a good journalist. If I'm going to, go get a story, I'm in the Society of Professional Journalists as a senior because I loved writing, and my mission was to help people and communicate, be in service to others. But he didn't even call me or get in touch with me or ask me my site. He just wrote a bunch of junk about me. He said I was a loon. His loon. He made me famous. He makes people famous for being dumb because I said something about star seeds. So it's already out there, folks. Theresa J Morris, if you want to look me up. But the good news is I'm putting out Theresa J Morris. And we're apparently now working with Bridgette in the Shaman People and the Psychic University. And now Bridgette has been with Revolution Radio a couple of years now, or a year.
I think like a year and a half, probably.
Yeah. And I started in the beginning, but I really enjoy you. I know you've only got a few minutes, so thank you, Bridgette. I apologize to you. That is not my normal. That is a lesson I have to learn, that I was trying to be here and my electronics were loading and not loading, and my family was having a psychic emergency in my living room. Big drama.
Yeah, that's all right. I figured that's what I said on the show. You probably had some kind of family, something going on.
Yeah.
And that way. But we're going to reboot you for the 26th.
Oh, thank you. That was very sweet. I apologize to everybody, especially to Bridgette. and all her listening audience.
And so Theresa J Morris. And anyway, so we're at the end of the show here, folks, and you've been listening to the Saturday edition of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show. And I'm your host, Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff. And so we'll see you on Wednesday. My show edition, Carrying Stones and Digging Holes, is at noon Eastern Standard Time to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So check in then. Anyway, have a great day, everybody. We'll see you on Wednesday. Bye.
Thank you, Bridgette. Bye.